is almost always my privilege to introduce our speakers. And tonight, our first speaker is Ryan Gerdesky. I almost forgot his name first. Ryan Gerdesky and Harlan Hill are the authors of the upcoming book, They're Not Listening: How the Elites Created the National Populist Revolution. And Ryan has his books for sale over there, and we'll have the book signing tomorrow in Dallas, so looking forward to that. Ryan is a political consultant and writer whose work has been featured in multiple publications, including the Washington Examiner, the American Conservative Magazine, This Week, Human Events, The Daily Caller, and townhall.com. From 2015 to 2017, Ryan was the senior writer for the conservative millennial website Red Alert Politics. Harlan Hill, who is not able to be with us tonight, is a Republican political consultant and commentator seen on Fox News, Fox Business, MSNBC, CNN, BBC, and Sky News. Hill is the managing partner of Logan Circle Group, a public relations and political consulting firm. He is an advisory board member of President Donald J. Trump's re-election campaign. So, Ryan, take it away.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. You know, I was here a year ago while I was writing the book, so it's literally a year ago from now. I just watched the videotape from a year ago, and I was wearing this exact same outfit. So if you, this is the second time meeting me, I own other clothes than the one I'm having. But thank you so much. So I wrote this book with my friend Harlan Hill, and it's about really what was going on in our world, what continues to go on in our world. I was a day one Donald Trump supporter. There was never a moment where I was evolving. And like so many people who work in the White House now and are still evolving. But I was a day one Trump supporter, and right after he won, and I worked in the media, and I worked actually with Bill Kristol, and it was a very hostile work environment, to say the least. But after he won, what was the reaction? I thought, oh wow, this is the moment. We're going to sit there and have this moment where we all kind of realize what's been going on, and that didn't happen at all. And instead we were told that if you supported him on the issues he ran on, you were alone, and you were isolated that. You were old, reactionary, you didn't have an opinion that mattered, you were racist, you were xenophobic, we heard the lines over and over again. And so, and they kind of throw Trump and Reagan together and said, oh, this is just Northern England, or the Rust Belt of Ohio and Wisconsin, and these people ignore them, and eventually we're going to become a great progressive society, and their opinions don't matter. Well, I was like, let me look at the chronological movement of national populism. Nationalism being the push for more national sovereignty, the control of your borders, the push for greater control of your own place, the fight between those who live somewhere, who take roots in places for generations sometimes, and those who move to any cosmopolitan, small L liberal city around the world. It means nothing to them. Being in London versus New York versus Singapore is just a change of an address, a mailing zip code. And then populism being a class stroke between those who are the working class and those who are the extreme elite. And it just so happens that globalists are usually the extreme elite. So I did this research, and it was in what I found out, and detail in the book, it's in every continent around the world. You know, this is really funny. One of the strongest positions against illegal immigration in the whole world is in Angola. And they don't like the illegal aliens from Congo. There's no racial difference at all. It's a cultural difference. It's an issue of sovereignty. It's an issue of borders. It's an issue of, does your government actually work for its people? And the book has 700 citations. It's really well researched, and it expresses and shows the growth of it on every continent on the planet. On issues as varied as our foreign policy, to immigration is a big part of it, to just how the economy works. You know, in the late 1980s, when George H.W. Bush took over, I say in the book, America's a nation always needs a mission. Whether it was going out west, or defeating the Soviets, or a nation that needs a mission. And after the end of the Cold War, our national mission became to expand liberalism. And the notion in our media, and in our academia, and in Washington was, if we could do this, we can make the whole world resemble us. If we just fight enough foreign wars, if we just open our borders up enough, and if we just completely dislocate, disassemble the industrial backbone of our country and put it in China, eventually everyone will look like us. This is what the mentality was for 30 years, and it failed. And neoliberalism failed. And that is why you're seeing it from Hungary to Poland to Brazil to Chile, Angola and Austria, Israel and India. The entire world is moving towards national populism. And I think this book is unique and the only one that details it on a global perspective. It's not a European thing, it's not a Christian thing, it's not an American thing, it's not a Trump thing. It's a human thing. Because the system that the elites have created for us simply just doesn't work. And this book really describes it, as such. I'll say just 2 questions. I know I don't have a lot of time. If anyone has any questions about the book, and by the way, we're selling them over there. You take debit card, credit card, cash, whatever. Anyone have any questions about the book or about national populism? I could just keep talking, but I'm just going to give up an opportunity. Anyone? No? Okay. I don't know if you saw me, I was just on Tucker Carlson. We talked a lot about the issues of what's going on right now as far as our nation with public safety goes, and with these riots that we're seeing, and with the need and the push to kind of withdraw our history from the world. And I've been saying all the time, there's never been, if you look at statistics and you look at facts, there's never been a better time in America to be black in this country. Poverty is lesser now than that, well, pre-COVID. Poverty was in the right way, it was moving in the right direction. Graduation rates, incarceration rates, everything you wanted to see grow. And yet, what was happening in the media, what the media was producing, and it's detailed in my book, what the media was producing is more woke terminology than ever. So you terms like whiteness, terms like white privilege, terms like person of color, which is a term I hate absolutely the most. All those terms were exploding in our regular dialogue by 800%, intensity. I think the term whiteness was used in 2% of all New York Times articles, all of them, about everything, 2%. So we were bombarded with the use of woke terminology, and we became believing something that wasn't true, but perception is reality. So all of the anger and all of the frustration, all of the push that we're seeing right now in our society is very orchestrated by usually woke white liberals who work in places like the media and in Washington, and they don't have the backbone, and we kind of lost the narrative over time. And that's one thing. The book also says immigration, as I said, foreign policy, the economy. The media is a big, big part of it. I've worked in the media, and not always a fun place. Not always the most honest place either. But that means I don't know where Julie is. I wanted to thank her too. But I don't know how much time I have left. I think I'm.
Take about
5 more minutes? Okay. Okay. There's the time check. Sorry, I was like, I don't know how long I can go for. And when and now that this election is coming up, everyone obviously knows how much anxiety everyone's having over the polls. And being a day one Trump supporter, we all have issues sometimes with the things that our president does and says and tweets. And I've constantly come into contact with Trump supporters who are just frustrated. And they're just like, I don't care. He didn't do everything I wanted him to do. And my answer is always like, yes, it's too bad that Hillary's not president. And Joe Biden, if you've looked at what he's promised now, the people he has promised to bring in his administration, it's the people who said, oh, it'd be great to overthrow Gaddafi in Libya. They'll be as free as Delaware. Susan Rice is in that grouping people. And the first thing he wants to do is blow open the border and give amnesty to every person who's here illegally. And I don't think it's fully set in, considering we've been the Republicans in power for 4 years now. Or actually, really since 2010, they've held one piece of the legislature to hold things up. I think a decade has added complacency, maybe not in this crowd, obviously, because you are the base you speak to. But I think that when you speak to people who sit there and say, what does it really matter? I mean, it will get really, really, really bad, because what Joe Biden has promised is, and what the team Joe Biden's assembled in, is what we got from Obama in 2008, but it's on speed. The Democratic Party is not what it even was even a decade ago as far as the push to sit there and radically alter our country forever. And it's not just socialism, it is neoliberalism. If you are a relative in the military, they will be fighting a war that you have no idea why, and you have no idea why we're there. It will be to abolish and erase borders, and to suppress wages. This is what their mentality is. And it's not just Democrats, because Nikki Haley is right on board with that promise as well, and so is half of the other Republicans in the room. And I think that it's important to sit there and be able to make the arguments as to why and what's happening when it comes to what the neoliberals want. It's not just the left; it's the neoliberals. And just a bit about myself, if you don't mind. I work in campaigns right now. I run a super PAC for Chris out in Kansas, if you guys know who he is, and just campaigning for Jeff Sessions in Alabama. But I think that is. I think the one thing going forward from this book, I hope that people could take besides just the facts of what's being pushed on us and how we got here, and the fact that you're not alone at all in feeling the way you do, or believing the opinions you have. You're not alone in the sense that it's happening every place in the entire globe, every corner of the globe. I think that the one thing I want to do is make a game plan, because too often people just get frustrated and upset and say, well, what can one person do? Or what can one gathering of people do? Or, where can we take this, where can we move this to? And that's, I think, one thing I think the book, at the end of the book, really kind of helps. Anyway, I don't want to take too much of your time. I know I have 5 more minutes. Any questions about? Yes, sir.
What do you think is going to happen with DACA?
Okay, great question, because I actually covered it. So, I'm not bragging about this at all. I get a call from the White House on Friday, from a high-up person in the White House, and several expletives were sat there and said to me, and they told me what Trump said during that telephone interview. And I said, please be honest with me, did you guys work on this? Are you guys doing something? Is this happening? And they said, I don't know what we're not working on it. I don't know what he's talking about. I truly don't know why. I know a lot of in this administration. I called every single person that I knew. And I said, do you know if there's a DACA amnesty down the pipeline? One, it's not even legal for the president to do on his own. So he can't sign an executive order. He can try to change statuses, but they would have to go back to any country they were born in. It would be a very messy process. He can't wave a wand and give them citizenship. I know it's a dream of Jared Kushner's, and I know it's a dream of Lindsey Graham's, but I just don't see it getting any further. The Democrats have made it clear that they don't want to work with him on it because they think they're going to take over the Senate and the presidency and the House, so they can do whatever they want. And I just don't think it's going to happen. I just don't. But Lindsey Graham wants it. Lindsey Graham was instrumental in pushing it because next year, if the Republicans keep the Senate, Chuck Grassley becomes the head of that committee, and he's a hardliner on immigration, and Lindsey Graham's dream is to destroy America. So that's where we are right now. That was just a joke, guys. Is that?
How true are the callers that we're seeing? How true are they?
Okay, so that's another great question. I have a podcast with the American Conservative magazine called Right Now, and I had on Robert Haley, who's head of the Trafalgar Group, the only group to get 2016 right. And he said the polls he believes are wrong because, and this is just what he says, and he was really right in 2016, and he got 2018, a lot of the races correct too, because he got DeSantis in Florida and no one else did. He said that people do not want to tell you something that they perceive not wanting to hear. So he said the biggest indicator for how Americans really feel is that in the last 2.5 months, 4 million Americans became first-time gun owners. And he said no one goes to go buy a gun and protect themselves and then votes for the party that's rooting for their house to get robbed. And that's not exactly what he said, but that is unquoted. So, could it be wrong? Yeah, listen, it's not the greatest situation for Trump to run in. We have a recession, we have a plague, and we have all the rest of it, people losing their minds and riots, and it's not the greatest situation in the world. But if there's any kind of case where that may be wrong, that's where it is. Look into the amount of people who are buying it. Don't sit there and break it down, by county or by state, whatever. But 4 million people who have never owned a gun before don't become first-time gun owners and vote for, the party demanding that their neighborhoods get burned down and say Minneapolis is an ideal location for them. So that's just my opinion. That's my opinion. Go ahead, yeah.
What about terrorism? What do you think about our situation in that area?
What do you, about terrorism? I mean, we have been very, very, very...
12 years ago.
We've been 12 years ago. I mean, we've been very fortunate, but at the same time, bigger problem is that every time, and I tell this in the book, that every time we sit there and say, you know what, we've been in Afghanistan for 20 years, and it's not looking any more like, Ohio than it was 20 years ago. I had a friend who was a comedian, and she toured Afghanistan, and I said, tell me, how much will it cost to fix Afghanistan? And she said, how much would it cost to fix the moon? Whatever number ran through your head, that's what Afghanistan looks like. So, I mean, I have a big position. If you don't want terrorists in our country, don't import them in our country. That's a big part of it. I don't believe in the fight the world and fight the world mentality, and that's the neoliberal position for the last couple of decades. Anyone last question? I'd be over there. Please support the book. I'd really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all you want and answer any other questions if you have them one-on-one. Any last one? I'll let the stage go. All right, guys. One more.
What's your quick take on the McCloskey business in St. Louis? June 28th.
Oh, yeah.
They came and took their own guns.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. I do think that I mean, you have to argue because did they point at the crowd and then point at the crowd? I think they should have shot a couple rounds in the air and that would have been fine. I know they didn't shoot them.
Still came, as per the DA, paid for by George Soros.
Right, and that's a really, really important thing. George Soros, the enemy of our world, sat there and said that he invested very heavily in DA races 2 years ago, and he won a lot of them. And it's the counties and it's the cities that are not prosecuting rioters that are his DA supporters, and we're completely without looking at. I could talk about that forever, but I have to let the stage go. Guys, I'll be over there. Please come by, support the book. It's $25, and I hope you share your money. And thank you again for hosting me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Our featured speaker tonight is KrisAnne Hall. She was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, which is just downriver from where I was born and raised in Quincy, Illinois. And she began her career as a biochemist, a Russian linguist for the U.S. Army, and a prosecutor for the state of Florida. Do you know anybody else that has a name? KrisAnne also practiced First Amendment law for the prominent national nonprofit law firm. She received her undergraduate degree in biochemistry from Blackburn College and her JD from the University of Florida Levin College of Law. KrisAnne is now the president of Liberty First University and travels the country teaching the foundational principles of liberty and our constitutional republic, and thank God that she does that. We need it. KrisAnne is the author of 6 books on the Constitution and Bill of Rights. She also has a nationally syndicated radio show and a cable television show. She has been featured on C-SPAN TV, C-SPAN Book TV, and will connect the dots for you like no one else can. KrisAnne is a disabled Army veteran, a mother, a pastor's wife, and a patriot. She lives in North Florida with her husband, J.C., who is an evangelist missionary to Haiti and a former Russian instructor for the U.S. Navy. And they have an adopted son, Colton. So please get ready for some really intense information. Take notes or watch the video later. I guess that's easier. Please welcome KrisAnne Hall.
It's funny that you said that because I have people all the time tell me that attending my classes is like drinking from a fire hose. So it's really just because I have such a short period of time with you, but there's so much information to cover. How many of you feel like you find out more and more every day things that you didn't know, that you wish you would have learned, you wish you would have been taught, things that you think America should know as a whole that we haven't been teaching for decades? Yeah. So that's part of what I do. I bring to you the education that we've been missing, and that's the connecting the dots part. I travel and I teach the Constitution of the United States all across America with a goal of teaching people people how to understand what is proper government and what is not proper government. That's something that we miss today. I mean, even in our circles where we have people that have conservatives, call themselves conservatives, asking government to do things that they're not empowered to do. We were built on the principles of self-governance. That is the foundation of America's constitutional republic. Limited government, self-governance of the people. But Samuel Adams said this: "No people will tamely surrender their liberties nor be easily subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved. But on the contrary, when the people become universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink underneath their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders." We have been fundamentally dumbed down, intentionally denied an education on proper government and proper constitutional republic for a very long time. Now, I've been studying this for a while, and that's why we have LibertyFirstUniversity.com to help people understand, because I can't be everywhere. We were teaching, before COVID hit, an average of 260 classes in over 22 states every single year. And Janet, my assistant, she's rolling her eyes at me for pointing her out, will tell you that in that list of 260 classes, she probably turned down just as many because we couldn't fit any more in the schedule. And it's because people begin to realize that something's missing. How many of you believe that our governments, and I used to preface this because I teach the U.S. Constitution, how many of you believe the federal government is out of control? Just a little bit? A lot, right? But now let me ask you, how many of you feel like your state and counties are out of control? Okay. Well, when I'm teaching you about principles of government, it's all government. Every single government in America is supposed to be based on the fundamental principles of limited government and self-governance of the people. We're supposed to be keeping our eyes on Washington, D.C. to make sure they're not trampling over and usurping our rights. But we're supposed to be intimately active at the state and local level. And the reason that our state and local governments are out of control, I believe, is because we become enamored with Emerald City. All of our political efforts focused at Washington, D.C. Oh, Trump this. Oh, Congress that. Oh, Senate this. We have been distracted from our own backyards. And the Marxists have crept their way in while we're subdued by the siren song, the glamour of Washington, D.C. And we're now seeing that it's time to roll up our sleeves and really do our work at home. How many of you agree? So this presentation is a little bit unique because I'm going to show you not only the U.S. Constitution, but we're going to go over your state constitution as well. Because I have found where everybody, in our circles, either owns or carries a pocket constitution of the U.S. Constitution, right? How many of you own or carry a copy of the Texas Constitution?
It's too big.
I mean, I have to have a library cared for us. It's become volumes just because we have mistreated our Constitution so gravely. I don't know if that's the same way in Texas, but to be honest with you, you don't need to carry the Texas Constitution. You need to carry the Texas Bill of Rights. There are some amazing things in here that when I show you, you're going to be like, why does the legislator, why does the governor even think he publication date of a book that changed how we thought about our Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. So how many of you here born before 1833? So the education that you've received on the U.S. Constitution and consequently on the proper application of your state constitution, if you haven't been born before 1833, is tainted at best. And I can tell you with a great deal of confidence that it's probably completely false. So I want to walk you through this issue of red flag laws. Now I know you've skirted the issue somewhat. Now your health code in Texas still allows an officer to identify someone he believes as having a mental illness. And without a warrant, to seize that person's arms. Now, I don't know about you. I know what they teach in the law enforcement academies. I used to teach them in Florida, and I teach law enforcement all over the country. I have a 3-hour course on the Constitution that I have taught to deputies and police officers all over the country because that's the most time I can get with them to jam in there all the stuff they don't teach at the academy. How many of you would like to keep your sheriff and your police officers out of lawsuits? How many of you realize the law enforcement academies don't teach them that? Well, that's what I do. But in all my experience with law enforcement academies, I've never seen them take a psych class, much less a class that qualifies them to identify what someone with a mental illness looks like. And it's all subjective. It's all based on opinion. And this officer doesn't need to have a second opinion. So you can creep in there, right? How many of the people that you know, what we normally label as the radical left, believe that any gun owner has a mental illness? These radical left people believe that simply because you want to own a gun, you're mentally ill. So I'm just trying to tell you, you get a perfect storm coming up here, even though you've avoided the most egregious of red flag laws that we see here in Florida. I'm telling you, it's knocking on your door. And I want to show you what your Constitution says so that you can fight this. How does government take your rights? Only when you let them. So what about these red flag laws? What I want to show you this evening, because everybody gets excited about somebody taking their guns, right? We're Americans. You're Texans, right? I don't think anybody loves guns more than Texans and Americans as a whole. So it's easy to get very passionate about your firearms and keeping your firearms and that sort of thing. But I want to show you that these red flag laws endanger more than your right to keep and bear arms. This is Samuel Adams, and he wrote an essay in 1772 called The Rights of the Colonists. And he wrote, among the natural rights of the colonists are these. Now, natural rights, I'm sure you know what that means. They don't come from government. They don't come from documents. They come from God by the nature of your creation. How many of you believe that liberty is a gift from God? How many of you need the government to live? How many of you remember or realize that property rights existed before government ever existed? See, these are natural rights. They come to us. He says, among the natural rights of the colonists are these. First, life. Secondly, liberty. Third, property. Together. Catch that. Together. Number 4. With the right to support and defend them in the best manner that they can. People talk about inalienable right to life, liberty, and property. What they forget is you also have an inalienable natural right to defend. And that is a self-defense. My right to defend my life, liberty, and property is not satisfied by being personal, these are natural rights. And if you have to wait for someone to come and defend your life, your liberty, and your property for you, then what you must realize is that person owns you. Whomever you're waiting to defend your life, your liberty, your property is now your owner. Because that person now has the authority to place a value on your life, on your liberty, and on your property, because at that moment they can look and say, guess what? That's too dangerous. I'm not risking my life for that. And in that moment, they have valued your life, liberty, and property to be less than their own. This is a natural, inherent, self-preservation right that stems from the first law of nature. Look at your Texas Constitution. All political power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their benefit. You are living in a state that recognizes their only authority stems from the existence of your individual personal natural rights. A government has no authority that you don't possess on your own as an individual. Is it lawful for you to go to your neighbor's house and take his gun because you don't like him or you think he's scary? If it's not lawful for you to do that, it is not lawful for someone in government to do that either. Because they don't possess any more power than we possess as individuals. A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, I have a whole class on what all those words mean. But I don't think you gotta be a professor or a chief justice to understand this stuff. So if you want the whole class, like I said, Liberty First University, we've got that on there, but I want to show you about the red flag laws. Look at your Texas Constitution. Every citizen shall have the right to keep and bear arms in the lawful defense of himself or the state. Now, according to your Constitution, your legislature only has an authority to regulate how you wear your guns. Not whether you have them or not, whether you can buy them or not, or whether you can carry them or not. You can carry them. According to your Constitution, you have a right to keep and bear. And the only authority that the people of Texas have delegated to their state legislators is to say how you carry. Not whether you can or not, let's be clear, but how. And we need to understand the distinction. The Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. But the Constitution of the state of Texas is the supreme law of Texas. And everything that government does must be in compliance with the Constitution. If it is not, it is null and void. Property has a very interesting definition from the terms of our founders. Generally speaking, today, in the limited nature of the way we teach things, property is your stuff, your house, your car, your gun. But James Madison wants us to understand, as a matter of fact, he's actually explaining this in an essay in 1792 called Property, because he's having an argument with Congress on what this means. Now, what you have here is James Madison, who historically is known as the father of the Constitution. He will be the fourth president under this Constitution, this version of our Constitution. But the man we call the father of the Constitution is trying to explain to Congress what they meant when they used that word property everywhere they used it. He says, this term in its particular application means that dominion which one man claims and exercises over the external things of the world, your stuff. But he says it's more than that. He says in its larger and juster meaning, it embraces everything to which a man may attach a value. He said it is true to say that a man has a right to his property, but it's even more true to say that a man has a property in his rights. See, property is physical and non-physical. Our freedom of speech is a property that we value and possess. Our freedom of religion is a property we value and possess. Look at what he says. Our right to be secure in our lives, our liberties, and our property is a property in and of itself. So when a government, through legislation, executive order, or just decree, attempts to control or take away your ability to defend your life, your liberty, and your property, what they're actually doing is stealing from you. Stealing from you one of the most valuable things that you can possess, the property in the defense of your own life. But how many of you learned Madison's essay in school? Any lawyers in the room ever learned it in law school? Now you see the subtlety of the universal ignorance that Samuel Adams was warning us about. When we lose sight of what is actually valued, we don't understand how important it is to maintain it. And we let it slip by degrees. Samuel Adams also wrote, when we tamely suffer a lawless attack upon our liberties, we encourage it, and we involve others in our doom. You see, because we didn't start off with gun control laws. You guys know that, right? It started off with a piece of paper. Just, we need a list. It's not going to cost you anything. It's not a big deal. We just need a list. And we said, okay. And then the government said, well, in order to maintain this list, we need some funding, because lists take money and you have to pay people to write them down. And okay, so it's, you just pay to help maintain the list. Okay, it's necessary. We get that. Well, it's not just the list that's important, because we've got to really identify people on the list who might be bad guys. So we're going to do a little bit more. We need a little bit more information. Okay, if it's to get the bad guys, really, I'm on board, because bad guys should have guns. Well, if we're going to make sure that the bad guys don't have guns, then we need to give you a piece of paper to prove that you're not a bad guy. No, all you have to do is apply, and we're going to give it to you. It's really no big deal. A little bit of money, it's just a checkbox thing, and okay, if it's just a checkbox thing, no big deal. Okay, that's fine. Well, now wait a minute. Maybe some people shouldn't get, right? Some people shouldn't have it. Well, we're still after the bad guys. So that's the important thing, right? Meanwhile, over a period of years, look how far we've tamely suffered a lawless attack upon our liberty. All under the guise of necessity. William Pitt the Younger said, no people will tamely I got that one wrong. William Pitt the Younger said that necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants, and it is the creed of slaves. But Adams finished when he said, if we tamely suffer a lawless attack upon our liberty, we encourage it. He says, we involve others in our doom. It's a serious consideration that should weigh heavy upon our hearts, that ages and millions yet unborn will be the miserable sharers of our experience. What we tolerate, what we allow in the name of necessity today will be the servitude that our children will suffer tomorrow. That's why we need to fight today. That's why this is what it is. That's why we have to stand and say no. Well, if the right to keep and bear arms is a property, then the taking of your right to keep and bear arms is a search and seizure, right? The Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. There's those magic words, right? Shall not be violated. No warrant shall issue, but based upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, particularly describing the place to be searched or the persons or things to be seized. Now, nobody raised their hand in the room when I asked about the lawyer, so let me just give you a little short lesson here, since we're talking about the seizure of your property. Most judges and lawyers and law professors will be quick to point out to you that you're not free from all searches and seizures, right? You're only free from the unreasonable ones. And then they love to get together in their little think tanks and try to define what reasonable is, right? So you can have reasonable searches and seizures, but you can't have unreasonable searches and seizures. So I'm going to tell you what years of lawyers and judges pooling their brains together have determined the definition of what a reasonable search and seizure might be. Everybody got your pen and paper ready? A reasonable search and seizure is what a reasonable person would find reasonable under reasonable circumstances. No, I'm not making that up. That's seriously the legal definition. How why? Why would they say that? Because the purpose is to increase the power of government and decrease your authority to control your own property. That would probably be blasphemy to most of my lawyer friends, but I'm not your average lawyer, so. Let me show you how the Fourth Amendment defines in its own text what reasonable is. Reasonable is a search pursuant to a warrant that is based upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation. Somebody has sworn and it is subject to due process. A warrant that particularly describes the place to be searched and particularly describes the persons or things to be seized. Now, what's interesting is a very powerful legal word in this document, and that word is and. You see, because that and, how many of y'all remember Schoolhouse Rock? Right? Conjunction, junction, what's your function? Right? What's the function of and? It's to join all these parts together. I want you to notice that this is A-N-D, not O-R. Because that's a huge difference. Because this is and, you have to have all 5 elements present at the exact same time to be, according to our Constitution, a reasonable search and seizure. It doesn't say or, it says and, so you have to have all 5. You can't have a reasonable search and seizure with 3 out of 5, with 4 out of 5, or even 4.5 out of 5. All 5 have to be present. Well, look at what Texas says. The people, what's that word? Shall. See, we've even lost understanding of how important that word shall actually is. That word shall is a legal mandate. It means that the judge cannot change his mind. There's no discretion. Nobody gets to choose. Whatever follows that word shall has to happen. The people shall be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and possessions from all unreasonable seizures or searches, and no warrant to search any place or to seize any person or thing shall be issued without describing them as people to be searched, it is an unlawful search and seizure. So these red flag laws, by the way, that require no warrant at all. As a matter of fact, there's no probable cause to them whatsoever. Somebody simply can make, in Florida, somebody can simply make an anonymous phone call to the police and say, this person is scary and they have guns and they make me feel scared. Then the police go to the judge. The judge issues this warrant, which is not a warrant under its name, to go take your stuff. Number one, a violation of your right to be secure in your persons, houses, papers, and possessions. But number two, your Fifth Amendment, nor shall be deprived of life, liberty, with our property without due process of law. Here's your state constitution. No citizen of this state shall be deprived of life, liberty, property, privileges, or immunities, or in any manner disenfranchised, except by the due course of law in the land. Do you know what these red flag laws do? They thrust you into a legal system that makes you guilty until you can prove your innocence. There's no due process before your property is taken. And there's very little due process once it is. Because then you have to go to court to prove that you are innocent. How many of you understand that's backwards? When the government accuses you of a crime, they hold the burden of proof. They must prove in a court of law beyond a reasonable doubt that you are guilty. If they cannot prove in a court of law beyond a reasonable doubt that you are guilty, then you are deemed by the court to be not guilty. Now let's be very clear. Not guilty is not the same as innocent. How many of you realize that? Okay, just ask OJ. But the burden is on the government because it's your life, your liberty, your possessions that are on the chopping block. And due process requires that you don't have to say a word and that they hold the burden of proof, but not under the red flag laws. Here's your Constitution again. No person's property shall be taken, damaged, or destroyed for or applied to public use without adequate compensation being made, unless the consent of such person, and only if the taking, damage, and destruction is for. This is the only way the government can take your property. Red flag is not on that list. And even if it were on that list, they would have to give you just compensation for the firearms that they're taking from you. Just compensation. Not just whatever they think is right. When a person's property is taken under subsection A of this section, except for the use of the state, compensation is described by subsection A shall be, what's that? First made or secured by a deposit of money. Before they take your property, they have to deposit the just compensation in a trust fund. Because you're entitled to due process and a trial by a jury. Now what they'll tell you is, well, that's really nice, KrisAnne, but we're not accusing you of a crime. So the Sixth Amendment doesn't apply. Or your section, which says, Section 15, the right of trial by jury shall remain inviolate. You know what that means? Shall not be infringed. It can't be taken from you. Your right to a trial by jury. Well, but we're not accusing you of a crime, so you don't get a right to a trial by jury. Well, if you're not accusing me of crime, then you've got no business taking my property. I mean, you saw in St. Louis, Kim Garner, the prosecutor up there, raiding those people. So this is what red flag laws do. Now, we have a podcast that we do Monday through Friday. It runs live. My husband and I do it together. And it runs live 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and then you can always catch the replays on YouTube later. But I covered the St. Louis story on my podcast. Because number one, you're not going to hear the media tell you the facts on these cases. How many of you realize that? And if anything, what they'll do is they'll get their panel of journalist experts, and they won't find a real constitutionally minded, educated attorney. They won't find a prosecutor that will give you the facts. They just want to give you what they want you to know. So in this podcast, I explained to you, just like I did here, I pulled up the Missouri Constitution. Do you know what the Missouri Constitution says? That the people of the state of Missouri shall have the right to keep and bear arms in defense of their life and their homes. It specifically says their homes. And yet Kim Garner, who's getting all the media attention, and then you got all the people scratching their heads, oh, what do we do? You know, protesters and rights and the people and whatever. No. Number one, those were not protesters. They were criminals. And somebody needs to find the fortitude to get on the press and say that. If you have to break down a gate to enter private property, you are a criminal. If when you enter that property, you are threatening people with violence, you are a criminal. We're talking vandalism, we're talking trespass, we're talking assault. That's not what we call a peaceful protest. That's what they don't even get to be called protesters. They must be called criminals. And yet Kim Garner's saying, oh no, we have to protect their rights while she's raiding the people's homes whose Constitution actually protects what they did. Why? Because they didn't read their Constitution. And they were never, ever charged with a crime. Not yet, anyway. And yet they're thrust into a system where they have to defend their innocence from nothing. In all criminal prosecutions, the state of Texas says, the accused shall have a speedy public trial by impartial jury. Red flag laws don't give you any jury trial. If they take your guns, you stand before a judge, thrust into a system of guilty until proven innocent, and you have to prove to a judge, probably the same one who issued the fake warrant to come get your stuff in the first place. There's no bias there, is there? You have the right to demand the nature and cause of the accusation against you and have a copy thereof. Under red flag laws, there are no accusations, especially if they come from an anonymous tip. Now, what happens if you stand up against a mask mandate? What if you stand up and challenge your county commissioner, and your county commissioner feels threatened because you're pointing out that their votes are unlawful and they're exercising way too much power, and now he feels afraid? Well, your county commissioner can now have your guns seized simply because you opposed them in public forum. But you don't need to know what charges are against you because there are no charges against you. The Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution guarantees you a right to a trial if the government takes your property worth more than $20. How many of you bought a firearm for less than $20 yesterday? I didn't even buy a box of ammo for less than $20. Yeah. No citizen of the state shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property and privileges and immunity except by the due course of the law. Your Constitution mirrors the Bill of Rights. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and the usual punishment inflicted. What is the reasonable fine for doing absolutely nothing wrong? What is a reasonable fine for engaging in your natural right to defend your life, your liberty, and your property? Well, according to the government, it's the taking of your stuff. court shall be open, and every person for an injury done to him in his lands, his goods, his person, or reputation shall have remedy by due process. Due process, by American definition, is innocent until proven guilty. And here's the crazy thing. You can go through this list in every single state. It's the same violations, state by state by state. But because we don't even know our state constitutions, because our judicial system has become politically corrupted, and because our governors become more like monarchs than servants of the people.
Yeah.
And our sheriffs no longer know that their primary job is to secure the rights of the people and not to be enforcers of the law. I have a whole course on the constitutional duty of the sheriff. If you know a sheriff that needs that explanation, I'd be happy to come back and help them with that as well. But I'm going to tell you about some maybe unforeseen consequence. Because we've been talking about property, right to trial, all that stuff, maybe no brainer. But what about this? If your county commissioner can make a call to a judge to get your guns taken because you opposed them at a county meeting, how many people will decide to just not even go to the county meetings? If you have a deputy or a police officer that has a king syndrome, and you have to stand up for yourself, and all it takes is for that deputy to go into the judge's office and say, it's my opinion that this person's not quite right. And I feel threatened in their presence. That's it. Your stuff's gone. How many people would just simply go along to get along? I'll tell you, statistics tell you about 95%. Why? Because the natural right to self-preservation exists because we have an essential urge for self-preservation. Or the other way around. Your urge to live will supersede your conscience to fight in 95% of the human population. And the chilling effect comes at the mere threat of the loss of your ability to protect your life, your liberty, and your property. And people will choose silence to keep their property. Every person shall be at liberty to speak, write, or publish his opinions on any subject, being responsible for the use of that published. No law shall ever be passed curtailing the liberty of speech or of the press. How many people would realize that red flag laws are a law being passed to curtail your freedom of speech and freedom of press? But how many of you see that to be a truth now? Madison, in his essay on property, this is not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where the property which a man has in his personal safety and his personal liberty is violated by arbitrary seizures of one class of citizens for the service of the rest. That's what you have. You have one class of citizens, the ignorant, the uber left, the Marxists, we can put them all in the same Marxist bubble, who don't want you to have guns. And they're using the government as a tool to search and seize you from your property to satisfy their own personal interests. And this is precisely why our constitutions are written. They are written down so there is no mistake. They are written down so there is a standard. They're written down to protect the people from the whim of the mob and to protect people from the course of corruption in government. And we can't continue to let them deceive us in what the purpose of government is and what the purpose of the protecting our rights means. So do you have a right to keep and bear arms? Well, a right is a just claim, a title, an ownership, the legal power of exclusive possession or enjoyment. Or do you have a permission? The act of permitting or allowing, allowance, license, or liberty granted. A license given is a power to take. And if they can take it without due process, it is no longer a right. It is now something that you enjoy by their permission. Every citizen shall have the right to keep and bear arms in the lawful defense of himself or the state. Shall. Shall means that these red flag laws have no place in any state, city, or county in America. Let the UN have them all over the world, but they don't belong here. Now let me wrap this up with this beautiful section in your Texas Constitution. Not every constitution has this section, by the way, but you do, and it's beautiful. Let me read it to you out loud. To guard against transgressions of high powers herein delegated, we declare that, what is that word? Everything. Say that again?
Everything.
Everything in this Bill of Rights is accepted out of the general powers of government and shall forever remain inviolate. And all laws contrary thereto or to the following provisions shall be void. Everything that I've shown you this evening is from your Bill of Rights, which your Section 29 says is completely outside the realm of your government. And anytime, I want you to catch that, anytime they write a law that transgresses upon those rights in that list, that law is null and void. I mean, seriously, if you study just one section in your Constitution, it ought to be this one. What do you do then? What do you do? You understand what null and void means? It means you don't have to comply. What do you have? What obligation do you have to comply with something that has no legal effect whatsoever? Just this one. Just the one that you impose in yourself through your own brain. Some people call it civil disobedience. Let me go back there. Some people call it civil disobedience. I don't like that term. You know why? Because when I'm living according to the fulfillment of my rights, I'm not being disobedient to anyone. It's the government that's being disobedient to your rights and to your Constitution and to your property. You are not being disobedient. That's why I call it peaceful non-compliance. Right? Because I don't have to comply with anything from a legal perspective on something that's going to be void. Now you're going to have somebody say that, KrisAnne, we need the lawyers and the judges to tell us what is constitutionally and what is constitutional and what is not. They got to tell us what our rights is. How many of you read what we had up here? I mean, seriously, you don't have to be a lawyer to know those words. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, being a lawyer will be a detriment to understanding what those things meant. But to say that someone else has the authority to define your rights is to say that you are not a free person and that you are ruled by an oligarchy. Look at what John Locke says. This sums up the justification that they use for red flag laws. If the innocent, honest man must quietly quit all he has for peace sake, to him who lay violent hands upon it, I desire it may be considered, what kind of peace will there be in a world which consists only for the benefit of robbers and oppressors? That's why Patrick Henry said, give me liberty or give me death. And the only question you need to have in any gun debate is this one right here. Do you trust that no one will use the power and force of government, either now or any time in the future, to try to take your life, your liberty, or your property? If the answer to that question is no, then the gun control debate is over. And of all people, this present generation in the year 2020 ought to know the answer to that question because we're seeing it fulfilled. Why is this important? Samuel Adams said it's important because our future depends on it. Our future generations will define us, not we ourselves. And we need to ask ourselves, will they curse us for being selfish people who sat on the sidelines and went along to get along while trading their rights and their liberties for our comfort? Or will we be a people that say, you know what, maybe we didn't do what we were supposed to do, maybe we didn't do everything we were supposed to do, but now we realize that we have to do something and not going to sit by anymore. We're going to step up, we're going to stand up, we're going to speak out, whatever the consequences may be, and we're not going to allow our children to be imprisoned in their rights, their liberties, and their properties. So how many of you enjoyed this class this evening? To disciple you. We don't just come here to drop a load of information and make your brain 4 pounds heavier. We realize that if we're going to be successful, we've got to continue with this education. So there are many ways we can help you with this, even when we're not here. Now we're going to be here. How many of you can think of 2 people that needed to be in this class tonight? How many are going to bring them tomorrow to Denton? That's my challenge. Don't leave this here. If you leave this here, I just spoke to an empty room. Liberty First University is where you can go online and train at your own pace. We have students, we have homeschool students all over the country. I don't even know, hundreds of them now. 6th grade and up. I have groups in law schools of law students who are students at libertyfirstuniversity.com because they realize their law professors are not teaching them the truth about the Constitution of America. We teach everybody from 6th grade to people who have PhDs in American history, in political science, and in government. I've taught Supreme Court justices here in Texas. Now, Liberty First University classes, some of them are available on, download them online. You can download them as downloadable videos, or you can buy the DVDs and we ship them to you. They sell for $19.97, but today we will sell them to you for $15 each or 4 for $50. You can have these classes: the power of the purse, religious liberty, 4th Amendment, 2nd Amendment, Constitution Week, all about the judiciary, Article 2, and the power of the president. One of my favorite classes is the America Disarmed. That's what we're going to be covering tomorrow. How one governor disarmed one town, and what our colonists did. So you can compare to what we're doing today. Now, because of COVID, we don't have an unlimited supply of those with us today. We also have books that are available, which we don't have with us today, but we can get you to purchase them today, and we will send them to you at this reduced price. So if you want to get your library digital, or you want to get some of our books, Miss Janet and my husband will help you do that. We will sell them to you here, and then our dear friend Mandy, who takes care of all our sales, will ship them directly to your house. Lord willing, right, Janet? This is all going to work out the way we